The night was cold and quiet as Jake walked near the edge of the human colony walls. Was not supposed to be out this late, but something had woken him up. A loud sound like thunder had shaken the ground. Jake was only 16 but brave like his father, who had died on Earth before the colony moved to this planet. He held a small flashlight and stepped carefully through the forest filled with silver trees and glowing plants. The noise had come from the west side, where no one was allowed to go. His heart beat faster, but his curiosity pulled him forward. He pushed past thick vines and broken branches until he saw a strange light in the distance. It was soft and blue like moonlight, but it moved like fire. As Jake came closer, he saw smoke and metal pieces scattered across the ground. A small alien ship had crashed into the forest. The front was smashed and burning, while the back was torn open inside the wreckage. He heard something move. Jake raised his flashlight and pointed it at the noise. Then he saw here a creature unlike anything he had seen before, tall and thin with glowing purple skin and long silver hair. Her arms were wrapped around a smaller figure, a child, maybe half her size, also glowing, but much weaker. She looked up at Jake with eyes full of fear and sadness. Her voice was soft and broken as she spoke. "Please, just one bite." Her arms shook as she lifted the child toward him. Child looked hungry and pale, eyes barely open, lips dry. Stepped back, unsure what to do. He wanted to run, but her voice was not angry or evil. It was desperate. "Please, just one bite." She pointed at the small bag Jake carried. He looked inside and found one protein bar, his favorite chocolate flavor. He held it tightly, not sure if he should give it. The child looked like he was dying, and the mother was barely able to stand. Jake slowly walked forward and unwrapped the bar. He held it out to the mother. Her hands trembled as she took it, then gently broke it into 2 pieces and gave one to the child. Child sniffed it, then slowly began to eat, his eyes closed, and he let out a sound like relief or peace. The mother smiled faintly, then her body suddenly shook. She collapsed to her knees, holding the child close. Jake ran forward, afraid she was hurt. She looked at him with fading eyes and whispered, "It's starting." Then she fell to the ground, completely still, her eyes wide open, but lifeless. Jake stared in shock, breathing hard. The child was still awake, but now his skin began to change. It shimmered like light on water, and his body looked stronger. Jake felt cold all over. Something was not right. The trees around him rustled, and he turned quickly. In the shadows he saw movement, figures watching from the dark, tall and quiet, their eyes glowing faintly. Jake grabbed the child's arm and pulled him back. "We have to go." He ran through the forest, holding the child, who was now silent and staring at the sky. Behind them the shadows followed, but did not attack. Jake reached the edge of the colony wall and used his emergency card to open the side gate. Alarms blinked, but no guards came this far out inside the walls. He hid the child in an old greenhouse no longer in use. He covered him with a warm blanket and gave him water. The child looked at him and spoke. "Mother said we would change after eating your food." Jake froze at the words. Change how? But the child only closed his eyes. Outside the glass, Jake saw 2 colony scouts walking past. He waved them down and shouted, "There's been a crash out there. We need help." They looked confused but followed him to the edge of the wall. When they saw the smoke and broken trees, they radioed the doctor and a rescue team. Jake led them back to the greenhouse, but when they looked inside, the child was gone. Only the protein wrapper remained and glowing footprints on the floor. The doctor stared at the prints and said nothing. Jake's mind was spinning. What did she mean? What was starting? And why did she say, "Please, just one bite"? He felt like something huge had begun, and he was right in the middle of it. Far away in the forest, the figures watched in silence. One of them whispered in a strange voice, "They fed him. It begins." Morning sun rose slowly over the colony, its light bouncing off the tall metal towers and glass walls that protected the last humans on this alien world. Jake sat alone near the edge of the greenhouse, his heart heavy and his thoughts racing with questions he could not answer. Alien child had vanished during the night, leaving only glowing footprints that faded with the rising sun, and no one believed what Jake had seen. They said the crash was just old space junk. They said no life was found. They said maybe Jake had been dreaming, but Jake knew the truth, and he remembered her voice begging just one bite. The rescue team had gone out early searching the crash site and bringing back strange, broken parts, some burned, some melted, and one small bracelet that pulsed with a red light. Dr. Lynn carried the bracelet into the lab, her face pale and serious and her hands shaking as she scanned the strange symbols written on its surface. Jake followed her, hoping for answers, and watching as the bracelet finally blinked and spoke in a robotic voice, so quiet yet clear. Do not feed us, do not trust us. Everyone in the lab went silent, their faces full of confusion and fear, but no one believed what it meant, not fully, not yet. Meanwhile, in the far corner of the lab, one of the rescue workers, a young man named Ravi, opened a small box found near the wreckage, and inside was a piece of dried alien food and a tiny bottle with silver liquid. He held it up and laughed, saying it looked like alien honey, and without asking anyone he dipped his finger in and tasted it. For a moment nothing happened. And then Ravi screamed and dropped to the floor, his skin glowing, his eyes turning bright gold, and his body shaking as if electricity flowed through him. Dr. Lynn rushed to him shouting orders, but it was too late. His body was changing, his bones cracking as his arms stretched. His voice, no longer human, sat up slowly, his eyes wide and empty, his mouth opening with a strange sound like many voices speaking at once. Hungry, more. Everyone backed away and locked the lab doors as the thing that had been Ravi stood tall, his body still shifting. Jake ran out the back of the lab into the hallway, his legs moving fast but his thoughts spinning faster, and all he could hear was the voice of the alien mother in his mind. It's starting. He knew he had to find the child. He had to understand what was happening and why the food changed them so quickly and so completely. In the dark corners of the colony, others had seen the lights in the forest too, and one small girl told her father that the glowing people were walking near the fences. The father laughed and said it was just a story, but that night he left out a piece of bread on a stone near the edge of the woods just to see what would happen in the morning. The bread was gone, and beside it were 3 long glowing hairs and a single handprint burned into the stone surface. Back in the lab, Dr. Lynn scanned Ravi's changing body and found something inside him, something growing quickly, something not human and not alive. Either something like a machine or a seed. She looked at Jake and whispered, they are using our food to grow, to become something else. And the more they eat, the faster it happens. Jake remembered the child's eyes, so innocent, yet so dark, when he said, "Mother said we will change," and he began to wonder if the child even needed help, or if it had all been a trick that night. Jake returned to the greenhouse alone. He waited in silence, holding another protein bar, and hoping the child would return. Hours passed and the moon rose, and the trees moved with the wind. And then he saw a soft glow near the edge of the garden. Child stepped into view, his body looking older, his arms longer, his skin brighter, and yet he looked tired, so tired. He sat down near Jake and said, I did not want to leave, but they are calling me. They want me to eat more, but I am scared. Jake asked him what happens when they eat too much, and the child looked at the stars before answering, we forget who we are, and we become what they made us for. Jake asked, who made you? And the child stayed quiet, then whispered, the ones who left us long ago, the ones who wanted to return through us. Before Jake could ask more, the child stood up and looked toward the forest and said, they are here behind him. The trees glowed and shadows moved, tall figures silent and glowing and watching with empty faces and hungry eyes. Jake stood frozen as the child said, they will ask you too, please, just one bite. And in the distance, a voice came, soft and familiar, just one bite, please. The colony was no longer silent as alarms echoed through the early morning air and red lights blinked across every building, warning of an unknown intruder. People came out of their homes, confused and half-awake eyes searching the walls for danger, but nothing could be seen beyond the fence, nothing but the tall silver trees and soft glowing mist inside the lab. Dr. Lynn stood frozen, staring at the body of Ravi, now locked behind thick glass. His shape no longer human, his fingers sharp, his eyes black and deep like cold water. He moved slowly back and forth inside the chamber, never blinking, never speaking, but always watching. Jake stood beside her and asked again, "What did we feed him, Doctor?" Lynn answered in a whisper, "I think it is not the food. It is the code inside the food, a key hidden in the protein, a message that their bodies know how to read." Jake remembered the alien mother's last words and felt the weight of her warning like a hand on his shoulder. The alien child was gone again, slipping away like mist into the forest, and Jake had no idea if he would return or if he was already one of them. The colony leader, Mr. Harlan, arrived with 2 guards, both carrying shock rifles and wearing armor, their faces hard, their eyes tired. He looked at the glass chamber, then at Dr. Lin, and said, "Is it dangerous?" Nodded slowly and replied, "Only if it eats again." Ravi's body twitched as if hearing her words, and his mouth opened into a wide, sharp grin, though he made no sound. Mr. Harlan ordered tighter lockdown and told the people that no one was to go near the fence, no one was to feed anything strange. No one was to trust anything glowing, but by then it was already too late outside the colony fence. 3 figures moved through the trees, tall and quiet, their steps light, their eyes glowing with hunger. One of them wore a piece of human clothing, a coat given to him the night before by a kind woman who thought he was cold. She had also given him soup. Now her house was empty, and the soup bowl was broken on the floor. Her door was open, and her windows shattered from the inside. No one saw her leave, but her scarf was found wrapped around the roots of a glowing tree near the forest edge. Back at the lab, the scanner beeped loudly, and Dr. Lin stared at the screen, her voice shaking as she said, "He is changing again, something new, something faster." Jake looked through the glass and saw Ravi's skin peel away like paper, revealing smooth silver metal beneath his arms. Longer now, his legs stronger, his back shaped like armor. "What are they turning into?" Jake asked, and Dr. Lin answered, "I think we are looking at a design, a weapon disguised as hunger." Jake ran to the greenhouse where it had all begun, hoping to find the child, hoping for answers, or at least something human left inside him. But the greenhouse was no longer safe. The air felt heavy, and the plants were dying, the light inside dim and strange. In the center stood the child, his eyes closed, his hands glowing softly, and around him floated broken pieces of metal and glass, rising slowly into the air as if caught in invisible waves. He opened his eyes and looked at Jake with sadness and spoke in a voice deeper than before, "It hurts to be this way, to feel myself vanish." Jake asked, "Who is doing this to you?" And the child pointed upward, not at the sky, but at the stars. "Beyond the stars, they made us to survive, but they made us wrong. They forgot to give us a stop." The child took a step forward, and Jake saw something under his skin moving like wires or vines, growing fast with each heartbeat. Jake begged him to stop, to fight it, but the child shook his head and said, "Once we eat, the change begins. And once it begins, there is no end." From behind the greenhouse, the guards shouted for Jake to get down, and he turned to see them raise their rifles, but he stood in front of the child, arms wide, yelling, "No, he is not the same, he is trying." The guards hesitated, and in that moment, the ground shook as something heavy landed near the fence, a sound like metal breaking and wood snapping. Everyone turned to look, and then they saw it. One of the tall aliens had grown even taller now, over 10 feet, with arms like machines and eyes like fire. It stepped over the broken fence and roared without sound, its voice a wave of pressure knocking down trees and windows. Jake grabbed the child and ran back toward the lab, shouting to open the doors. "Open the doors now, Dr. Lin." Hit the switch, and the doors opened just as the monster reached the edge of the colony, its hand grabbing a tree and crushing it like paper. The child turned to look one last time and whispered he was the first to eat, and now he is not hungry anymore. Then the doors shut behind them, and the colony fell silent again, but only for a moment, because in the dark forest, more lights were moving and more voices were whispering. "Please, just one bite, before the crash, before the hunger, before the begging." There was silence in the deep cold of space, a silence older than time, where the ship floated like a lost memory, a silver shadow drifting far from any sun inside the ship. The alien mother stood tall and calm, her long fingers moving across a glowing panel. Her eyes closed as she listened to a voice that was not a voice, a signal that pulsed in her mind. Like an old lullaby, she turned and looked at the rows of sleeping children, their bodies curled inside crystal pods, each one glowing faintly, their faces peaceful, their dreams silent. She placed her hand on one pod, her own child inside, sleeping and safe for now, but not for long. "The food is gone," the voice had said. "The planet ahead is green and full and soft. They will feed you and you will grow. And when you grow, you will remember," she whispered to herself. "I do not want to remember. I want to survive without becoming what they want." But the voice only repeated the same words, the same code as always: survive, evolve, replace. She walked to the back of the ship where another figure waited, tall and dark, with eyes that never blinked. The commander of the ship. "The one who never ate, never slept, only watched," he said. "The humans will help us. They always help when they feel sad, when they feel sorry. When they see weakness, they will feed us, and when they do, we will change." Mother looked away, her voice quiet but firm. "What if we do not want to change? What if we wish to live without the final stage?" The commander replied, "Then we die slowly, and our children become dust. Or we eat and become gods." Ship began to shake, alarms blinking as they entered the planet's atmosphere, the heat rising, the systems failing, the final crash already written in the stars. The mother took her child from the pod, holding him close as fire filled the sky and gravity pulled them down. Her voice, "The only thing left to offer, just one bite," she whispered, "just one bite, and maybe they will see." Then the ship fell and the test began. Now, days later, back on the colony, Jake sat in the medical room, his hands shaking, his face pale, as he listened to Dr. Lin explain what she had found. The food was not special, not poisoned, not strange. It was ordinary human food, but the alien bodies responded to it like a key in a lock, a perfect match that activated something inside them. Something hidden, waiting, sleeping, and it was not a virus, it was not a parasite, it was a choice. Their choice, Jake asked. Then why did she beg? Why ask for food if she knew the danger? Dr. Lin looked at the bracelet still blinking with its strange warning and said, "Maybe she was trying to stop it, or maybe she wanted to test us to see if we would give in." Outside, the colony leaders gathered in the main hall, arguing, voices rising as fear took root. Some said kill them all, some said study them, some said send them back into the forest. But no one said the word invasion, not yet. Back in the greenhouse, the alien child sat alone, drawing shapes on the floor with light from his fingers. His face calm but his eyes heavy, as if he carried memories older than his small body. Jake entered slowly and sat beside him. No words at first, just silence between them. Then the child spoke. "They think we came to destroy. But that is not true. We came to find out who we are." J asked, "What are you really?" And the child looked up at the sky and said, "We are what you made us long ago. Your kind found us in the dark and changed us to survive. But then you left, and we forgot who we were." Jake felt a chill in his chest and said, "We have never been here before. This is not our planet." The child shook his head and replied, "No, not this one, but others before it. You traveled far before the fall. You changed many things, and some of those things became us." Jake could not speak the truth, too big to hold. Suddenly a loud crash shook the walls as a figure slammed against the colony gates, huge and glowing, its face blank, its mouth open wide without sound. It was the one who had eaten too much, the one who no longer remembered anything but hunger. Guards opened fire, blue energy bolts cutting through the air. But the creature did not fall, it did not bleed. It only moved forward, arms wide, ready to break through. The child stood and looked toward the gate, his voice calm. "We should not have come, but the hunger was too strong, the signal too loud." Jake asked what signal, and the child pointed to the sky beyond. "The stars, beyond the black, beyond the forgotten. They are calling us back, and they will not stop until we are complete inside." The lab, the scanner blinked red as new signals appeared around the colony. More life forms, more movement, more voices whispering from the dark, "Please, just one bite, please. We are still hungry. Please let us in." The Colony lights began to flicker as power lines snapped and the wall sensors failed. Jake looked at the child and said, "Tell me what to do, how to stop it." Child did not answer. He only held out his hand, blowing softly, and said, "You gave us food. Maybe now you must give us a choice." And in the dark the whisper returned, "It was a test and you passed, or maybe you failed." The sun rose late and weak, as if even the sky feared what was coming. The colony stood quiet and broken, its walls bent and its gates shattered. The people inside hiding in corners, clutching their children, whispering prayers they had not spoken in years. Smoke drifted through the streets, and the smell of burnt metal filled every breath. The Great One, the creature born from the first bite, still walked the edge of the trees, his body part flesh, part light, part machine, his face blank and hungry. Dr. Lin moved through the ruined medical center, carrying a small device in her hands, her eyes locked on the signals flashing across its screen. More of them were coming, not one, not two, but many more, drawn by the scent of food and fear. Jake sat beside the alien child, who no longer looked like a child, his skin smooth and silver, his eyes deep and quiet, his voice no longer shaking when he spoke. "They cannot stop now," he said. "The first bites have awakened the rest, and now they will come to feed, or they will come to end what began." Jake wanted to believe there was still hope, but every sign pointed to something worse, something spreading faster than anyone could contain. Because kindness had opened the door, and hunger had walked through it. In the shadows of the outer buildings, group of colonists met in secret, their faces angry, their hands full of weapons. They called themselves the Last Guard, and they had one mission: to end the threat before it ended them. They moved quietly through the night, dragging anyone who had fed an alien, anyone who had helped anyone who had shown mercy, and locking them in the underground vault once used for old supplies. One woman cried as they pushed her inside, screaming, "He was just a child, he was just a child." But no one listened anymore, not with the sky turning red and the ground trembling like a heartbeat. The Great One had not moved for hours, but his presence made the air heavy, his breath like wind and ash, his hands always reaching, but never touching, as if waiting for permission. Dr. Lin stood before the colony leaders and held up her device, her voice steady but her hands cold. She told them the truth. She told them the hunger was not a sickness or a trick. It was a design, something made long ago, something that waited for human kindness to bloom. She said, "Our food gives them form, our care gives them purpose, our fear gives them power, and now they are more than they were, and less than we are." The leaders argued. Some wanted to flee, some wanted to fight, some wanted to beg for peace, but no one agreed, and no one acted, and time kept moving like a slow burning fuse. Jake followed the child into the forest, where the trees glowed faintly, and the wind whispered with strange voices. He asked where they were going, and the child said, "To the place where it began, the place where the first hunger was born." They reached the old crash site, now silent and cold, broken metal scattered like bones across the ground, the ship's heart still pulsing faintly with blue light. Child placed his hand on the control panel, and the ground shifted, opening a path beneath the wreck, a hidden chamber glowing with symbols and light. Inside were more pods, more children still sleeping, still untouched by hunger, still pure and dreaming. Jake asked, "Why did you not wake them?" And the child answered, "Because I was the first, I was the key, and if I changed, then they would follow, and if I stayed, they would sleep forever." Jake looked at the pods and saw faces peaceful and still, unaware of the war above them, unaware of the hunger waiting beyond the stars. He said, "Then stay, do not let them wake, do not let the hunger grow." And the child looked at him and whispered, "I am already changing, I can feel it in my bones, in my voice, in my mind." Suddenly a loud sound echoed through the chamber, the entrance shaking, dust falling from above. The Great One had moved, his steps cracking the earth, his arms reaching for the shore pod walls. Jake shouted, "We have to stop him." And the child said, "You cannot. He is not just hunger, he is the answer to a question we should never have asked back in the colony." The vault burst open, energy tearing through metal as the prisoners screamed, and light poured out of their eyes one by one. They rose, changed, no longer human, no longer afraid. Last Guard fired, but their bullets turned to ash. Their weapons melted in their hands, and the changed ones moved like wind, like shadow, like memory, Doctor. Lynn watched from the rooftop, her eyes wide, as she spoke into the recorder. This is not war. This is not invasion. This is awakening, and we were the match in. The final moment, Jake stood between the Great One and the sleeping pods, his arms wide, his voice strong, saying, "You will not take them. You will not feed." The Great One paused, his head tilting, his eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in recognition, and then the whisper came again, not from one, not from many, but from the stars above, from the silence. Beyond the silence, from the voice that made the first hunger. "You gave them food, you gave them form, now give them the future." And the child stepped forward, no longer afraid, no longer a child, and he said, "I will choose, and I choose to end it here." Colony was quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the heavy quiet that comes before a storm, the kind that fills the air with questions, the kind that makes every sound feel like a warning. Ash covered the walkways, and the walls were cracked from the night before. Shadows moved between broken lights, and the people stayed inside, afraid to look out, afraid to see what might be watching from the trees. Doctor Lynn walked the empty halls of the lab, carrying her scanner pressed tight against her chest, the screen flickering with new shapes, new signals, new heat signatures that did not match anything in the colony database. She stopped near the old security room and opened the door, slow and careful, and what she saw inside made her freeze. One of the guards stood in the center, his uniform still clean, his hands at his side, but his eyes too wide, too still, too quiet, his skin smooth like plastic, his breath even and slow like a machine pretending to be alive. He turned and smiled, a perfect smile, too perfect, and said in a voice soft and clean, "I think I need some rest. Can you show me the medical wing, Doctor?" Lynn backed away without answering and closed the door, her hands shaking, her mind racing. They were not just feeding, they were changing, and now they were blending in across the colony. Other strange things were happening, small things. At first, someone remembering something they had never lived. Someone knowing a password they had never used. Someone moving with too much grace, too much calm, too much control. At first no one noticed, or if they did, they said nothing, because fear makes people quiet, and silence is the first ally of invasion. Jake sat near the greenhouse, staring at the stars that no longer looked the same. They were brighter, sharper, closer, like eyes watching through the dark sky, waiting for the final step. The alien child, now more than a child, now more than alien, stood beside him without speaking, his body still glowing faintly, but his voice silent, as if words were no longer enough. Jake asked, "What comes next?" And the child said, "You already know. We are not the only ones here now. Some of your people, some of ours." There's no line anymore. Jake wanted to scream, but he stayed still, because screaming would make it real, and he was not ready for it to be real inside the lab. Doctor Lynn opened the old data vault and played a message hidden deep in the files. A voice from years ago, a voice from Earth, from the first days of the space program, a voice saying, "We found something in the dark. It was asleep. It was waiting. It wanted to be like us." She realized then this was not the first time, and it would not be the last. Every colony, every planet, every mission, they always fed it, they always helped it grow, they always made the same mistake. At the edge of the forest, a small group of survivors gathered, watching the trees, watching the light, watching the shapes that moved without sound. They whispered to each other, "We must leave, we must run, we must find another place." But where could they go when the stars were no longer safe, when the enemy could wear any face back? In the colony center, a man named Elias stood before the people and spoke with calm strength. In his voice he said, "We must come together. We must not fear our neighbors. We must not give in to panic." But as he spoke, Jake saw the way he blinked, too slow, too smooth, the way he tilted his head, the way his words felt too perfect, like reading from a script not written by human hands. The child looked at Jake and whispered, "He is one of them, and he does not know. He believes he is still human, and maybe he is. Maybe we all are a little." Dr. Lynn called for a meeting in the old control room and brought the scanner readings. She showed the heat maps, the changes in body temperature, the changes in heart Rate the changes in thought patterns. She said some of us have changed, and we do not even know. Some of us have already crossed over and never felt it happen. The room went silent as the lights flickered, and someone in the corner whispered, "Then how do we know who to trust?" And the answer came not from anyone in the room, but from the speakers still connected to the wrecked alien ship. A voice, soft and layered, a voice that sounded like all of them speaking at once. Trust the ones who are still afraid. Trust the ones who still choose not to eat. Trust the ones who do not feel perfect. Jake stood and looked around, and he saw faces, some scared, some calm, some too calm, and he realized the invasion was not coming. It was already here, and it wore their faces. The child placed a hand on Jake's shoulder and said, "If we become you and you become us, then maybe the war is not about survival. Maybe it is about identity. Maybe the question is not who wins, but who forgets first." Outside, the stars blinked like signals, and the wind carried voices, and the forest began to glow again, and the colony lights dimmed again, and the silence returned again. The kind before a storm, the kind after one. The sky had changed, and no one could explain why the stars moved like thoughts slipping through dreams. The moon no longer whole, but cracked like glass, and the light that fell on the colony was not the same light they had known before. The people moved slower. Now some walked in silence with perfect smiles and steady hands. Some sat for hours staring at nothing, blinking only when they remembered how, and others, like Jake, still felt the fear, still felt the edge between human and something else. Jake walked through the ruins of the greenhouse where it had all started, the vines now glowing with soft light, the ground warm with quiet energy, the place breathing as if alive. The alien child stood there, taller now and quiet, his body smooth and silver, his eyes deep like mirrors, and his voice softer than ever when he spoke. "They are not coming, Jake. They are already here. They have always been here, not outside, but inside, watching, waiting, learning, and now they are ready." Jake asked again, "Why food? Why beg? Why pretend to be weak and hungry if the plan was always to take over?" Child looked at the sky and answered, "Because food is not just hunger, food is trust. Food is care, food is belief. And when someone feeds you, they open their heart, and once the heart is open, everything else follows." Dr. Lin stood inside the lab running her last tests, checking every signal, every cell, every memory pattern. She had scanned her own blood and found something new, a slow shift in the code. Something added, something changing, and she had not eaten any alien food. She whispered to herself, "It is not the food. It never was. It is the feeling, it is the choice, the act of feeding, the act of kindness that opens the door." The ship at the crash site began to hum again, its broken systems healing slowly, its lights blinking in perfect rhythm, as if counting down to something final, something written in the stars long before the colony even landed. Jake and the child returned to the command tower where the last of the colony leaders now waited, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, their voices slow and unsure. One of them stood and asked, "Is this the end?" And the child replied, "No, this is the moment between what you were and what you are becoming." Another asked, "Can we fight this?" And the child answered, "You are not at war, you are at the edge of memory, and once you cross it, there is no war, only acceptance." Jake stepped forward and said, "But we never agreed to this. We never said yes. We never welcomed them." And the child turned to him and spoke with sadness but truth, "You said yes. The moment you gave me food, the moment you gave me shelter, the moment you called me child and not monster." In the vault below the colony, the pods began to open slowly, one by one, soft light pouring out as the children inside stepped into the world, blinking slowly, breathing deeply, their minds already filled with thoughts not their own. Dr. Lin watched from the screen and realized it was not about soldiers or weapons or control. It was about merging, it was about connection, and once enough hearts were open, the rest would follow like water down a hill. The Great One stood at the forest edge, no longer moving, no longer hunting, just waiting, his body still, his mind quiet, his role complete. Jake asked the child then, "What happens now?" And the child replied, "Now you choose not to stop us, not to fight us, but to join us, or remember who you were, and walk away knowing the stars will keep calling. Offered his hand glowing with gentle light and said, you trusted me once. Jake, trust me now and let the future begin. Jake looked around, saw faces he knew, and faces he did not, people smiling, people crying, people changing without pain, without fear. As if waking from a long sleep, he looked at Dr. Lin, who nodded slowly, her eyes full of tears, but not sadness. She said, maybe this is not the end. Maybe this is how we begin again. And then the voice came, not from the child, not from the sky, but from within, like an old memory, waking up, a voice that was human and not human, a voice made from many voices speaking as one. This was never about food. This was about belief. This was about love. This was about what you give and what it makes you. And now you have given everything. Jake took the child's hand, and the light around them grew brighter, and the stars above blinked in rhythm, and the people all across the colony closed their eyes and remembered. They remembered who they were and who they could become. And then the sky opened, not with fire, not with war, but with light and song and memory and future. And the hunger faded, not because it was fed, but because it was understood.